from his wife, Kelly, that I'd like you to listen to. Thank you.
I met Rand on a beautiful spring day in April. Thought he was cute. He was a cute, curly-headed guy. I also thought he was probably 18 years old and still in college. He looked so young. So I kind of blew him off at first. But Rand kept trying. He was kind of persistent at the party, and he came up to me again a little bit later, and we started talking. And during our conversation, I realized that he was not 18. He was 26 and a surgical intern at Georgia Baptist. Very intelligent, very well read, and really like no one that I'd ever met before. Rand is the middle child of 5. From what I've heard from his siblings growing up, he's a lot like he is today. He was opinionated, had a lot of energy, played a lot of sports. He also loved to collect coins, which is something that he used to do with his grandmother. He was very close to her, and through the years, as her eyesight began to fail, he became her eyes to spy the faint mint marks on the coins as they would go through them together. But Rand never forgot how sad it was for him to watch his grandmother lose her vision, and I think that really cemented in him the desire to be an ophthalmologist. One of the most gratifying things for Rand in his career has been the ability to do eye surgery on children from Guatemala starting 15 years ago. And now he's gone back to Guatemala and operated on hundreds of other patients there. One couple that Rand told me about was especially powerful and memorable. He operated on a woman who had not been able to see. 2 days later, she brought her husband, and he was also blinded by cataracts. And Rand described them removing his patch and him seeing his wife and her being able to see him for the first time in 7 or 8 years. And he said it was an incredibly moving experience. I think it's moments like that that really speak to who he is as a surgeon and what motivates him. Rand is a wonderful dad. He's got great energy and enthusiasm, and he's always been a wonderful builder of forts, bonfires, anything active and outside. From an early age, all of our boys love sports, and Rand has coached Little League baseball, soccer, you name it, he's out there. Being a physician gives Rand a unique perspective in Washington, simply because he's trained to diagnose the problem and find a solution. He truly believes that if you believe in something, you should get involved. If you put your mind and your energy to it, you can do it. And I think that's a great example for our kids. And it's also something that makes him an amazing person to be married to. Rand has the energy, the ideas, the honesty to really help restore the prosperity and hope in our country. He loves making a difference as a doctor, and he believes that he can make a difference as the president.
Hello, thank you all for coming out. My name is David Waterman. I have the privilege of helping set this up today. I am a senior marketing major over at Northwest Nazarene University and the president of the Students for Liberty Club. So have the privilege of introducing someone to you today. I would like to welcome Idaho's congressman for the 1st Congressional District, Congressman Raul Labrador. Congressman Labrador was elected to represent the 1st District in 2010. Before that, he served in the House of Representatives in the Idaho State Legislature. Before he served as a congressman, he had a small, successful business in Idaho. He's been married to his wife, Becca, now for 24 years and is raising a family in Eagle, Idaho. They are the proud parents of 5 children, including a daughter-in-law, and 3 of those children are in college right now, and 2 of them are still at home. During his time in Congress, Congressman Labrador has been a tireless champion for policies that promote fiscal responsibility, individual liberty, and small government. Along with Senator Rand Paul, he is fighting to bring a conservative reform agenda to Washington, D.C. that will put Americans first. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Congressman Raul Labrador.
Good afternoon. It's a great honor to be here. It's great to be here with Rand. We started in Idaho. We started up in Coeur d'Alene. We've done Boise. We're now at Nampa. We're going to go to Idaho Falls all in one day. It's pretty exciting. It's the middle of the afternoon, so make sure when you welcome him, you're very enthusiastic, all right? Because it's a late day. Started late last night, and it's going to end late tonight. You know, there's a lot of reasons why I'm supporting Rand Paul. Rand Paul is a great patriot. He's a great father, as you can see by the video. He's a great husband. He's a very intelligent man. He's dedicated to the community. Just the last month, when other people were campaigning nationally for the presidency, he was actually in Haiti working with people that were in need. He decided not to change his plans, even though he's running for president. He has done a lot of different things. But the main reason I'm supporting Rand Paul is probably exemplified by what happened to me when I went to Cleveland to the debate. I went to Cleveland to participate in the media scrum when Rand was in the debate, and I forgot something at home, so I had to go to the pharmacy in the morning just before the debate. And I ended up going to the pharmacy. I'm wearing shorts, my flip-flops, a T-shirt. You know, nobody knows who I am from Adam in Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm walking to the pharmacy, and there's two gentlemen talking to each other. One gentleman had a long ponytail, and the other gentleman was talking, and you could tell he was kind of a liberal Democrat, just in the conversation, the way they were talking to each other. And they're going back and forth, and they're talking about how they can't believe that the first debate is in Cleveland, how they hate all the Republicans, how they couldn't really stand any other people. They start naming names of all the people that they don't like. And finally, the one guy with the long ponytail looks at the other guy and says, but you know what? I can vote for Rand. Rand Paul's a good guy. And the guy who was a liberal Democrat looks at him and says, you know what? I could support Rand Paul, maybe, depending on who the Democratic nominee is. And then they went into a 3-minute conversation about how Rand Paul is a different kind of Republican, how Rand Paul is somebody different. And the reason I tell you this story is for many, many years, we have been told as Republicans that we have to nominate the most moderate candidate because they're the only ones who can win. We have to nominate the person who doesn't really know how to express vividly and valiantly what the values of the Republican Party are. And that's how we got stuck with people like Bob Dole. That's how we got stuck with people like John McCain. They're all good patriots. They're good people, but there were people who could not win general elections. I can bet you that there wasn't a guy at a pharmacy with a ponytail telling a friend that he was excited about John McCain. And I can tell you that there wasn't a guy with a ponytail at a pharmacy telling his friend that he was excited about Bob Dole. But what I like about Rand Paul is that he stands on conservative principles. He was one of the people that went back to Washington, D.C. with me back in 2010. And what I learned in 2010, sadly, is that a lot of people campaigned on changing what Washington was about. But as soon as they got there, they really enjoyed the title, they enjoyed the perks of the office, and they decided that they didn't really want to change what is happening in Washington, D.C. Rand Paul has stood strong from the beginning of his service as a senator, and to this day is trying to change the Washington machine. It's trying to change everything that is happening in Washington. He's the only candidate who has submitted 3 different budgets that would balance within 5 years. And that is a huge deal, because every Republican tells you that they want to balance the budget, but they don't want to tell you how they're going to balance the budget. Rand Paul is willing to do that. And second, and he's also the only major candidate who has a flat tax. He has a flat tax plan at 14.5% that would make it easier for each one of you to pay your taxes and would get rid of the IRS. So for that and for many other reasons, even though I think we have a lot of good people running for president, I'm actually friends with most, if not all, of the candidates that are running for president. I have looked at all of their ideas. I have looked at everything they stand for. I have looked at their values and their beliefs. And I believe that the values of Idaho are more closely aligned with Rand Paul than with any other candidate that is running for president. And I very wholeheartedly have endorsed them. And it's an honor and a pleasure for me to introduce to you the next president of the United States, Rand Paul.
Many times people will ask me, they will say, why did you decide to run for office? Why did you leave a profession that is generally well respected to go into a profession that's ladies, have you got my microphone on, anybody? No, let me try the back button here. How's that? No? No. Got it? So why would you leave a respected profession to go into maybe not so well respected profession? Well, I kind of jokingly say, well, I got tired of throwing things at my TV. And that's like a lot of us. We get frustrated with government. We say, my goodness, can't somebody just do something better? Can't we inject some common sense? But it's also, I got tired actually of Republicans telling me one thing and doing another. I got tired of going out, knocking on doors, giving money to candidates and saying, they would say, I'm conservative, I'm for a balanced budget. And sure enough, they'd vote for a balanced budget amendment, but they would never vote for a balanced budget. There's a little bit of a difference. One is symbolic, and it could be good. I'm for a balanced budget amendment, we should pass one. But the thing is we also have a chance every year to balance the budget, or to vote for a plan to balance the budget. Nobody will. So I got to Washington and said, I'm going to put one forward. I put pencil to paper, and we eliminated 5 departments. That's just starting. That's just getting started. I grew up when Reagan was running. In fact, I met him in 1976 when he was running against the establishment, against Ford. And when Reagan ran, the Department of Education had just been formed under Jimmy Carter, and he said, look, there is nothing in the Constitution that says that we need a federal involvement in our education. Nothing. So he ran for getting rid of the Department of Education. It was part of the Republican platform for some reason. And I still believe it ought to be part of our platform. Let's get rid of the whole thing. Let's bring it back to the Senate. And people say, well, what about our schools? How would we fund our schools? Your schools are funded locally. They always have been. If you look at the funding for your local public schools, 95% of it comes from your local taxes. If you talk to your teachers and your teachers say, well, I'm not so sure that sounds anti-education to be getting rid of the Department of Education. When you ask your local teachers, ask them whether or not they think someone in Washington knows whether they're a good teacher or not. We have bureaucrats in Washington judging our teachers and saying they're failing, when in all reality, you know where we need to look for failure? Washington, and also in the mirror. It's lack of parents. It's lack of parental involvement. It's lack of reading to your kids. It's all of these things. But I think sometimes we think it's so easy saying, oh, it's the teacher's fault or it's the school's fault. Well, no, it's our fault often. We do need to do a better job. We need to pry kids away from the TV. Drive away from your video game. Well, the kids are not any smarter. There's no objective evidence. They're scoring better on tests. They're beleaguered with tests. Ask the teachers, if you're trying to get the teachers on our side, ask the teachers if they like teaching the kids to 10 tests all year long and spending all their time trying to teach to a test. We've taken power away from teachers. Ask the teachers if they want more power. Ask the principals if they want more power over determining how and what to teach their kids. Ask the parents whether the curriculum should be in Washington or whether the curriculum ought to be here in Nampa. Without question, I say we need local control of the schools. We need to tell Washington to take a hike. But it doesn't end there. Think about your property. Do you own your property or does the federal government own your property? You know what's happened? The government has now said that if a bird lands on a pond, the bird lives on the Great Lakes and it lands in your backyard is now connected to the Great Lakes. You remember there was a family in Idaho that wanted to build near a lake. And they wanted to build on the side of a slope, and there were 2 houses on a house on either side of them. They started putting gravel on their lot. You know what the government said? You're violating the Clean Water Act. And the family in Idaho up at Priest Lake said, well, there are people on both sides of us and there's no water on our land. How could it possibly be a wetland? And the government said, because we said it so. They started finding them $37,000 a day. Millions and millions of dollars held up. This finally went all the way to the Supreme Court. You know what the Supreme Court finally did? Something right. They voted 9-0 to say, you know what? You can't take someone's property without any kind of trial, without any kind of jurisdiction. You can't just take someone's property. But it's happening time and time again. Robert Lucas lived in the southern part of Mississippi. He was a businessman and he developed commercial real estate. His daughter was 43, she was a nurse, and she sold lots part-time for him. He was 70 years old and he had the audacity to put dirt on his land. Clean dirt on his land. He was given 10 years in prison for RICO violations, conspiracy to violate the Clean Water Act. You say, how could this be? How could this be in my country? The Clean Water Act is not bad. The Clean Water Act says you can't discharge pollutants into navigable water. I'm for that. You shouldn't be allowed to discharge oil or benzene or dump anything in the rivers. Private property says that also, but the government has said that. The problem is along the way, we redefine a navigable water as your backyard, and we redefine pollutant as dirt. So dirt is a pollutant and your backyard is a navigable water. It's become insane. You know who doubled the size of the amount of wetlands in our country by a definitional change, by a bureaucrat changing it? The first George Bush, a Republican. So it is important which Republican you get. If you get any old Republican, you're going to get any old big government that continues to grow and grow and grow. Unless you get an activist that's willing to cut government, it's like a boulder rolling downhill, collecting your rights as it rolls downhill and collecting money and power and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We are not going to be able to transform Washington unless you have a president who will stand up and say, enough's enough. I'm only going to spend what comes in. I'm giving the power back to the states and the people, and I'm going to get government out of the way. Now, some have said, how could we possibly cut any spending? Well, let me give you a couple of examples of where your money's going. Last year, we spent $800,000 developing a televised cricket league in Afghanistan. So we don't have any money. We borrow $1 million a minute. There's not enough money to take care of the things we need to be doing for our country. So we spend $800,000 that we don't have, and we borrow basically from China to send it to Afghanistan for a televised cricket league. Do you know how many people have televisions in Afghanistan? 1 in 10,000 people have TVs. So we're televising cricket for them at your expense, and they don't even have TVs. I don't care if they all have TVs. We don't have money to do that. Just last week, my staff discovered that we spent $250,000 at last year to bring 24 kids from Pakistan to send them to space camp in Alabama. We don't have enough money to take care of our own problems, and we're bringing 25 kids from Pakistan to send them to space camp. The list goes on and on. You would be horrified to know what your government's doing. The last one I'll leave you with on the government waste is, we spent $300,000 studying Japanese quail to see whether or not Japanese quail are more promiscuous when they're on cocaine. I'm guessing we could have polled the audience on that. How do we make it better? The Tea Party started because we were unhappy with Republicans who doubled the debt under the last Republican administration. They grew the size of the Department of Education. They concentrated more power. They added more entitlements. Now, are Democrats worse? Yes. A lot worse, exponentially worse. But we can't be the party of the less bad. We can't be, hey, vote for me, I'm going to add debt less fast. So the last Republican administration doubled the debt of the country. We are now tripling and quadrupling it. President Obama is going to add more debt than all of the previous presidents combined. We borrow $1 million a minute, and it threatens the very foundation of our country. Anybody know a 26-year-old living at home with their parents, looking for a job? You want jobs in America, you can't have this horrendous debt. Also, if you want jobs in America, you got to quit chasing them away. We have a 70,000-page tax code, 70,000 pages. Chasing American jobs, chasing American companies overseas. Last year, Burger King reincorporated in Canada. I'm embarrassed that I have to compliment Canada. Canada's got lower taxes than we do. We have the highest business tax in the world. 35% corporate business tax in America. It's 15% in Canada. You got a new startup business. You think they're going to be here or go overseas? We have our American companies that are reincorporating in Europe because we have the highest tax code in the world. So you know what I would do with all 70,000 pages of tax code? I'd scrap the whole damn thing and start over. Tax code with a one-page tax return. Multiply by 14.5% for businesses and for individuals, and it would be trillions and trillions, probably $2 trillion tax cut. Money that's left with you and not sent to Washington. And then let's have a grand debate. Let's have the debate with Hillary Clinton. Let's debate whether money is better spent by leaving it in Nampa, leaving it in Idaho, or sending it to Washington. They don't create any jobs in Washington. There are two sectors, the private sector, the productive sector. I'm looking at it, but what I see in Washington, many of them have never had a real job. Many of them went straight into politics out of college. That's all they've ever done. They don't know how to create jobs, and most of the things they do are actually counterproductive. They take the money from you, which punishes you and makes it less likely that you can buy stuff locally and create jobs. And then when they spend it on regulations that hurt our jobs. 70,000-page tax code and 70,000 pages of regulation. Money goes where it's welcome. You make money unwelcome in our country, it's going somewhere else. It's a big, wide world, and money's going to go where it's welcome. But imagine this. Imagine if we had a single low tax rate, one of the lowest in the world, competitive with the world. Can you imagine what it would be like if companies were beating our door down wanting to come and locate here instead of trying to escape? That can happen again, but it's not going to happen with any old Republican. If you want another Bush or if you want another Clinton, you're going to get more of the same. Government will stay about the same. Is Jeb Bush a bad person? No, he's not a bad person. He'd be better than Hillary Clinton. A little bit. but the thing is government will stay about the same. It'll be a little more pro-business and a little less antagonistic to business, but government will continue to grow. When people talk about the baseline spending of government, you think, oh, well, that means this is the baseline. No, the baseline of spending goes up every year. So when they talk about cutting trillions of dollars, they're never being honest with you. We're talking about cutting trillions of dollars of proposed spending, but it's always going up. The sequester, which they've all moaned about the sequester, and finally they got together and got rid of, the sequester was just slowing down the rate of growth of spending. We should just freeze spending. In fact, if you cut spending by 1%, cut spending by 1 penny out of every dollar, we call it the penny plan, the budget balances in less than 5 years. Anybody here ever had to have a 1% cut in their wages? 1% cut in their salary? You cut 1 penny out of every dollar of government and it'll balance in 5 years. That would send a signal to the marketplace and to the world that we're serious. Investments would go up, the stock market would go up, we would have more jobs. We have to understand one fundamental precept, that you create jobs, that the private sector creates jobs, and that you don't want big government, you want very small government. Why does it get worse whether you have Republicans involved or Democrats involved? Because there's an unholy alliance in Washington. The right says we want unlimited military spending. The left says we want unlimited welfare spending. You know what they do? They get together and they raise everything. So when they got rid of the sequester last year, it was to increase military spending. You say, well, I'm for a strong military. So am I. I think the most important thing we do in Washington is national defense, bar none. So if you ask me to weigh the balance of where I would spend money, it would be on defending the country. I'll do whatever it takes to defend the country, except for borrow the money from China, except for expand our debt. So if you tell me you want me to spend more money on the military, I'll do it, but only if I cut it somewhere else. So we had a budget vote not too long ago, and there were people who wanted to vastly increase defense spending. And I said, well, you can't do that unless you're willing to offset it by cutting some other spending. Money doesn't grow on trees, and we're borrowing $1 billion a minute. So when they introduced theirs, I said I won't vote for it, but I tell you what, I'll introduce a competing amendment that would increase military spending, but offset every bit of it by cutting spending. You know how many people voted for mine? Like 4. Everybody's for free spending. Everybody's for spending your money as long as there is no accountability. We don't have to cut anywhere. That's how we got in this mess. $18 trillion, over $18 trillion. The debt is as big as our entire economy. So we have to rethink what we're doing. We're going to have to nominate someone who's serious. If it's me, I'm serious. In fact, if they send me money as president, I'll only spend what it takes to actually fix the problem. What if we actually had a president who spent half what was allocated on all the problems and said, we'll fix them with half as much? And that's dramatic. We only have to cut 1% a year. 1% a year to balance the budget. Well, we can't even get to where we're holding even. We're increasing spending every year, but it's out of control. We also have to decide how we're going to defend the country. They asked me in the presidential debate last week, 2 weeks ago, they said, what will you do about ISIS? I said, why don't we start with not arming them? ISIS rides around in $1 billion of U.S. Humvees. They pay their soldiers with $1 billion worth of U.S. cash that was left behind. They have anti-tank weapons. They have tanks. All of it ours. I've been asking people for months now, it's like, can't we put a code in there that you have to have the code to turn it on? Maybe we could put a GPS in there and we could target. So maybe we just shouldn't be so easy about giving away our own stuff. How did they get it? They got it by confiscating a lot of it in Mosul, by defeating Mosul. Mosul's a city of 1.5 million Sunnis. Who was defending it? 1,000 Shiites. If you haven't heard, they hate each other. They hate each other for 1,000 years and will for 1,000 more. But the government in Baghdad is all Shiite, almost entirely. And guess who their #1 ally is? Iran. Guess who their other #1 ally is? Us. So we're in concert with Iran. You've heard Iran's a threat. But we're their ally in the war against ISIS. Iran has troops fighting along with Shiites there. We won't defeat ISIS until we get Sunnis involved. They say they want boots on the ground. Well, we do need boots on the ground, Arab boots on the ground.
Yes.
If you want to send our sons and daughters back to war in Iraq, if you want 500,000 people there and you're insisting that America dominate the Middle East and win the Middle East and create peace and loving people forever. I'm not your guy. I'm not sending people back over there until we can figure out the mess. I'm not sending any soldiers back over there. Not one If you want war in the Middle East, there'll always be a Bush or a Clinton. Doesn't matter which one, really. Hillary Clinton wanted to go to war in Libya. Do you think that helped us? We toppled Gaddafi, and when we did, what happened? We got chaos, civil war, and the rise of radical Islam. We are more at risk from attack from Libya now than we were before the war. The war in Syria, there's a civil war going on. Assad is a dictator, and you got a bunch of Islamic groups on the other side. So our brilliant people in Congress said, let's give weapons to the moderate Syrian rebels. And I said, you think you can tell the difference? Even if you speak Arabic, they lied to us. Do you think one of the Islamic groups in Syria that's fighting Assad, do you think one of them would recognize Israel? No way. You're kidding yourself. In fact, some of them that we have given weapons to have said when they're done with Assad, they're going to attack Israel with the weapons we gave them. Many of them, the weapons were quickly snatched up by ISIS. Some of the weapons we gave probably went directly to ISIS. The ambassador, our former ambassador to Syria, he was in front of our committee and he said that it was inevitable that the weapons we put into Syria will fight alongside Al-Qaeda. And I was like, is that who we're fighting? Haven't we been trying to resist Al-Qaeda for 15 years? And now you're telling me that I should ask our people to be taxed to send weapons to people who are fighting alongside Al-Qaeda? I said, oh, we're just giving it to the Syrian moderates and it's inevitable they'll fight with Al-Qaeda. It's like, it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not voting for it. And most every Republican voted for it. And I said, no. I said, this is crazy. The Syrian moderates, one CIA analyst said, the only thing moderate about them is their ability to fight. The Syrian rebels, we weren't getting anywhere, and so we decided we'd take them out of the country and start training them in this great army that was going to defeat ISIS. We have $500 million of yours allotted to this task. So far, we've trained 60 with $250 million. So it's about $4 million per fighter. And then some genius decided that their training, we'd send 5 of them to war. Who sends 5 people to war? They were captured in 10 minutes. Who captured them? Al-Nusra. Who's Al-Nusra? One of our allies in the war. Who are they really? Jihadists who hate us and are allied with Al-Qaeda, who just have a different name, but are essentially the same people. We have to think before we act. We have to think before we get back involved in the Middle East. If there's one thing we should learn from that mess, every time we topple a secular dictator, we've gotten chaos, the rise of radical Islam, and we're left safe. We need to think this through. There's only one person on the stage who's opposed to this. Almost everyone else on the stage not only supports all of this, they want your kids over there. Not just in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, in Nigeria. There are 30 countries that now say they are pledging allegiance to this radical Islam. I don't like it. I don't want them in our country, and I want to defend us against them. But I also don't think having our kids in 30 countries is going to do the trick. In fact, I think it kind of distracts us. We have to think before we act in our foreign policy. If we're going to have a good country again, though, we have to have a big debate. We got to have a big debate. I know it is pretty easy for Republicans to win. Any of the 55 Republicans running for office could probably win. But what you get to decide is which one is the best Republican to win, and which is the best Republican to win the whole country. We got to be able to win Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Some of these states we haven't won in 30 years. And so some in our party have said we need to dilute what we stand for. We need to become Democrat-like, and if we're Democrat-like, then we'll be fine and we'll win again. I couldn't disagree more. I say all along. I think you can be a principled conservative, someone who believes in balanced budgets, low taxes, less regulation, all the stuff supposedly we believe in. But I think you take that message and you figure out, how do we take that message to people who haven't been listening to this? How do you take it to Berkeley, who liberal college, you get them to listen. How do you take it to the south side of Chicago, where nobody's been voting Republican for 100 years? The way you do it is you take it consistently there and you say, what have the Democrats done for you lately? How are they helping with poverty in the south side of Chicago? When you send your money to Washington, do you ever get any of it back? In Chicago, they're figuring it out. There's a machine, a Democrat machine. If you're related to it or kin to it, you might get some of the money. The poor people never end up with the money. They just get poorer and their communities are a mess. So what I've said to south side of Chicago is, we're not going to send your money to Washington, period. I'll leave $3 billion in the south side of Chicago over 10 years. Not send it from Idaho, just leave it there. Don't tax them. Give them like a tax-free zone where you have poverty and say, look, if you live next to this area, you'll move your business in there, you don't pay taxes. Incentives will work, people will work, you'll get employment again. When people are employed, they're less likely to get in trouble, they're less likely to be involved with violence, less likely to be involved with drugs. But you know what? We can be concerned with those who don't have jobs, who live in poverty. But let's take our message to them. It has to be a message of cutting taxes and leaving money in your community. In Washington, nobody's even for cutting taxes anymore. Most of you Republicans, you know what they're for? Revenue neutral tax rate. I say good luck. I'm not knocking on doors for anybody. It tells me they're for revenue neutral tax reform. That means half of you will pay more and half of you will pay less, and the net result is zero. Who cares? I mean, if that's what we're for, I'm going home. I don't care to really spend all the time participating in something, but we're really not going to change the country. If we want to win nationally, what I say is we should be more boldly for what we are for. We ought to be the party of the entire Bill of Rights. We shouldn't let Democrats say, oh, they're for justice and fairness. I'm for justice and fairness. I'm for the Bill of Rights that defends everybody, no matter who you are. I am for minority rights. People say, well, I'm not a minority. Why do I care about minority rights? You can be a minority because of the color of your skin or the shape of your ideology. You can be a minority because of your religion. You can be a minority because you want to teach your kids at home. You can be a minority because you believe in the Constitution. So there's a lot of reasons why you want all of your individual rights to be protected. The Second Amendment, we're mostly good with it. Most everybody that comes to campaign, Republicans will say they're for the Second Amendment. I tell people, if you don't believe I'm for the Second Amendment, come into my house unannounced. But if you want to defend the Second Amendment, you got to be for the Fourth Amendment. You can't let the government come in your house without a warrant. You can't let the government collect all your phone records without a warrant. You can't let the government produce a register of everybody that has a gun and doesn't. Imagine if you're a woman that's been abused by a boyfriend. Imagine if you're a judge or prosecutor. Do you want everybody in town to know where you live and whether you have a gun or not? It's probably more unsafe to let people know that you don't have a gun. So the thing is do you want to be a woman who's been abused by a boyfriend or an ex-husband or something and let them know where you live and whether you have a gun or don't have a gun? Records are pretty important, and it's pretty important that they're private and that the government not reveal these things. I don't want the government collecting all my records. 95% of your credit card records are collected right now. But you're supposed to just trust the government. But if I have your credit card records, I can tell whether you drink, whether you smoke, whether you gamble. Of course, this is Idaho, so you don't do any of those, right? These are private things. And some people say, well, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. There's sort of the assumption is that your privacy is that you're doing something wrong. But you can have privacy because you're doing something right. Maybe you don't want people to know what church you go to, or you don't want people invading your private sphere. Doesn't mean you're doing something wrong, just means you believe in privacy. But we've got to defend the Fourth Amendment the same way we defend the Second Amendment. We've got to defend the First Amendment the same way we defend the Second Amendment. The Fifth and Sixth Amendment talk about, to me, I think, justice. Fifth Amendment says they can't take your property. Ever since the Kelo case in 2005, the Supreme Court said that we can take your private property from an individual homeowner and give it to a big corporation because they'll pay more taxes. That's the law of the land right now. Pretty sad, but that's the law of the land. What's even sadder is about 30% of our party thinks, oh my goodness, Donald Trump's going to save us. know who supports eminent domain and his business model is put up a casino, condemn the property, take the houses. Vera Koking had a house for 30 years. Trump bought the casino land next to her, and then he had the government boot her over her protest. She lived in the same house for 30 years. Why? You want to put a limo parking lot there. You're fooling yourselves if you think he's a conservative. He's a television reality show. We've got to defend the entire Bill of Rights. The Sixth Amendment says you have a right to a trial by jury. And you think to yourself, who could possibly be against the right to a trial by jury? In 2011, though, you lost it, at least a part of it. We had a vote over whether or not an American citizen can be detained without a trial. And I was aghast. I was having this debate on the Senate floor with another Republican senator. I don't like to name names, but he's from Arizona. And I was debating him and I was aghast. I said, do you mean an American citizen could be sent to Guantanamo Bay without a lawyer, without a trial? And he said, yeah, if they're dangerous. So it begs the question, I did the best to determine who's dangerous and who's not. You also need to think about who the potential terrorists are. They have lists of them. The government puts out who are potential terrorists. Having a pro-life bumper sticker puts you in a category of suspicion. Saying that we need to have immigration law and security of the border makes you someone who might be risky. Once upon a time, having a Ron Paul bumper sticker made you something. But they put out a whole list, and all of this was people who were missing fingers. I must have met half a dozen farmers who are missing fingers who were not terrorists, any of them. Stains on the clothing. I've met a lot of messy coffee drinkers, none of them were terrorists. Likes to pay in cash is another characteristic. These are all characteristics of potential terrorists and of people your government wants you to report. Yeah. See something, know something, report your neighbor. Yeah. That doesn't really sound that encouraging to me. People like to pay in cash, you're supposed to report them. People have multiple guns in their house. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. And my favorite is people who have recently changed the color of their hair. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. These are the suspicious things for terrorists. So you know what? If we're going to pick people and pluck them off the street for those characteristics, I damn sure want a lawyer before they come to my house. And when we were having this debate, the first thing that came to my mind was Richard Jewell. Remember Richard Jewell? Everybody said it was the Olympic bomber, Centennial Park bomber. Several people died in Atlanta probably 15 years ago. The media, it's almost immediate. The media said he did it. Within hours, everybody in America almost knew his name and thought he was the bomber. The only problem was he wasn't the bomber. He wasn't guilty. But he kind of fit the profile. He had glasses. See a few of you out there. He was introverted and he wore a backpack. So therefore, and he was helpful. I don't know why helpful is a bad characteristic. He was helping people out. And so they said he was guilty, but he wasn't. But the thing about justice, and the reason you want the Bill of Rights is because not only was he wrongly accused, imagine in your mind the time when, what if he'd been a black man in the South in 1920? What if he'd been a Mormon at one period of time? What if he'd been anything, any kind of persecuted minority? That's why you have the Bill of Rights. So there's a great deal of reason why we shouldn't give up on this. And when you're thinking about this and thinking, well, I want to catch terrorists, and I'm fine with them not having a trial, realize that you might be the terrorist, all right? So realize that there can be false accusations. And also, when you think about the Bill of Rights and you think about how important it is to be innocent, to be presumed innocent until guilty, think about the GI who lost both legs in an arm fighting for this. I have a GI in my neighborhood town, both legs in an arm. You ask him what he fought for? So he fought for the Bill of Rights. He fought for the Constitution. Wouldn't it be sad if we gave up on that? You know? Wouldn't it be a sad disrespecting of their service if we gave up on that? So what I'm saying is think long and hard about it. Think long and hard about who is going to be our nominee, but think long and hard about shouldn't we be the party of justice again? Shouldn't we be the party that defends the Sixth Amendment with the same equal fervor that we defend the Second Amendment? You know what I'm thoroughly convinced of? If we become the party that defends justice and the Sixth Amendment with the same fervor that we defend the Second Amendment, we're going to rock and roll to victory. We're going to win across the land. That's the party I want to be part of. And I hope you do too. Thank you very
Thank you all for attending today. If you would like to get involved, please visit randpaul.com. You can also follow the Senator's latest news and stops on his Twitter by following @randpaul. So thank you to the Nampa Civic Center for having us here today. And thank you for Senator Paul for coming out and seeing us in Nampa. Thanks.
Lisa. Hey, how are you? How are you?